10 years after her first book, Mrs. Funnybones, was published, Twinkle Khanna is out with its sequel, Mrs. Funnybones Returns. We speak with the author, columnist, entrepreneur, and talk show host about the book and her writing style and a lot more. Twinkle, congratulations on a new book. The first question, and the most obvious one: why did it take so long to come out with a sequel to Mrs. Funnybones?
No, I never thought I would do a sequel. And when I did the first Mrs. Funnybones, I did a collection of short stories. I did a novel. And then after I did my master's, I did another collection of short stories. And it was during that tour that I realized how much this book meant to so many people. I think somewhere, at least for me, maybe because I grew up sort of reading, literary fiction, I took the Funnybones voice a little bit for granted. And so I didn't really think I would do it. And then I heard all these women telling me, there was a little girl, she said, but she wasn't very little, she was maybe, in her early 20s, and she said the book was like a bowl of kheer. Somebody came to interview me today, and she said, I read your book when I was covering Afghanistan. Oh. So the book reaches labor rooms, it reaches war zones, and obviously it's speaking to people and giving them comfort. And I realized that there is tremendous value in it, in what I had not been seeing all this time.
Tell us about the book. What is new? What is the most exciting thing for readers?
I think for readers, it's also a way of seeing a decade of India, of women, how that has changed and how my perspective has also changed. The things that we were talking about earlier and what we're talking about now. And has there been a really significant change in women's lives? Sure, if you read the papers, you'll say education is better, women have bank accounts, but have we entered the workforce as much as we should have? We haven't. Has the social structure of our life, our relationships changed? It hasn't. So it's an insight because it covers a decade.
You use a lot of wit and sarcasm in your writing, and you touch upon subjects from politics to families and parenting. Is that your writing style, or it depends on the column or the book that you're writing about?
In the columns, definitely. I use humor to get the point across. Because if you make somebody laugh at something, then they look at it completely in a different light. And it's also more palatable. And you can say a lot of things and get away with it, which you would not be able to if you were just putting it down straight, especially when it comes to politics. So I would say it's my disguise, it's my armor, and it lets me get the point across. In some fiction, I definitely use a more reflective voice because that's the way that story needs to be told. So I think my voice automatically alters when it comes to Mrs. Funnybones. There is only one way to write it. There are certain columns which are serious in Mrs. Funnybones as well. But by and large, it just happens.
Writing is a very rewarding experience, but at the same time, it can be torturous. Do you experience that writer's block, and how do you deal with it?
It's absolutely not rewarding while you're writing. Absolutely not. You are taking your head and you're banging it against a wall and hoping something shakes and you get, some new ideas. So I think for the first, I've been writing now for about 12, 13, 14 years, I've lost count. But for the first few years, I would sit at my desk. And I had this theory that even if the muse is going to somebody else, if I just sit here, I can catch the muse on its way and bring it back to my desk. And now I'm too old because when I sit at my desk, my neck starts hurting. So I can't sit at my desk anymore. So now I walk. I keep walking. And when I'm walking my dog and I'm seeing, people walk by or I'm doing some gardening, the ideas will all come together. I have to do my research. I have to look at all my notes. And then I have to leave it. And then I just walk and it comes together and then I sit at my desk. So I think this is a tip for older writers. We just cannot sit at our desk anymore. Our body is not going to let us. So perhaps this works.
Is there a particular process that you follow? Do you keep going back to your work, reworking it?
Oh yeah. I don't think I've ever submitted even a third draft. It's become better. Earlier, when I started writing columns, I had maybe 11 drafts, but but now it's about 3 to 4 drafts. The first draft is, I would say, absolute nonsense. It's just whatever ideas I have, they're disjointed. I think what I do well, though, is I find a common thread between very, very disparate things. So I can write about Labubus and I can use Plato's idea of beauty, or I can write about a photograph. Once I did a column, actually, it was about a photograph of space and Hema Malini. And I can find that thread. So if I have any gifts, I think that is the only gift I have. I can find something in common with anything, between two subjects.
You did a master's in writing from London.
Yes.
How did that help you? And would you recommend such a workshop or course for aspiring writers?
So I did two things. During the pandemic, I did 2 courses at Oxford. One was beginners in non-fiction and one was advanced in fiction. And then I went back to university and did my master's. In terms of how I work towards a column, nothing has changed. It's exactly the way that I used to write earlier. Even the framework, the process, the skeleton, everything is the same. When it comes to storytelling otherwise, whether it's short stories or novels, it's completely changed. So again, it's the medium that you're, sort of your format that you're writing in, where these things come in. I feel for me, it was fantastic because the Oxford courses gave me technical skills. And the masters, because we had to workshop so much, with other students, our own work, other writers, it gave me the ability to dissect writing and see all the scaffolding behind the words. So how do you construct a narrative? What are the techniques you use? How do you work with time across a story? So those are the things. I would highly recommend it because it also gives you, I would say, along with this entire structure, you have something to rely on now. You know that, okay, I can fix it this way. You have techniques and you learn what is the most efficient way to tell a story. But no one can really teach you how to write because that's part of your perspective, that unique perspective.
That's true. You write a lot about societal issues and women are the central characters in your book mostly. Is that deliberate?
If I said that I don't think men are that interesting, I don't know what you'd say. But I'm fascinated by older women. I feel that as the world starts making them invisible, I find them more and more interesting. I always have. I feel that they have so much experience. There are so many layers. They've gone beyond binaries. There is no right, wrong, white, black. The gray in their hair is the gray in their life. And I find that fascinating.
Are you trying to be a voice for these women and their everyday struggles?
I'm not trying to be a voice for them. I am fascinated by them. And I believe that their stories should be out there. Why are we, always focusing on youth? And I think it was Ursula Le Guin who said that beauty when you're young is just a byproduct of hormones. I'm paraphrasing. But as you get older, you earn it. And that is the real beauty. Why do we neglect that and just look at the one that is purely because of hormones?
How much time did it take for you to write Mrs. Funnybones Returns, and when did that clarity of thought come that this is what I'm going to write about?
So Mrs. Funnybones Returns is based and curated from the columns. I've been writing these columns for 10 years. So this is 10 years worth of columns. To look at it, curate it, revisit it, rewrite pieces, because again, they had to. So, for example, if there's a column about mother-in-laws, a lot changed in the 10 years. My mother-in-law passed away. So I had to rewrite those columns. I had to rewrite a lot of things to make them seamless and to also match, the period we're in right now. I guess that would be about a year and a half. But the columns themselves have been written over 10 years.
Your first book was a bestseller, Mrs. Funnybones. Have you reread it recently? And if you were to write that today, what is the different thing that you would do?
I think Mrs. Funnybones, again, when it came out, it did very well. But I kept thinking I want to do something different. I never sit down and say, this is perfect. I don't look back. If you ask me from all my books, when I reread them or look at them, Welcome to Paradise is the one book that I feel satisfied that I didn't make any compromises. I wrote it the way I wanted to write it. I wrote it at a stage in my life when I feel I had enough experience behind me to be able to negotiate things like loneliness and mortality and age and the layers of, being, I would say, the layers of being. So that for me is a book that I would not rewrite. Every other book, yes, I wish I could. I would just rewrite whole chunks.
What are some of these compromises that you were talking about?
Sometimes there are compromises that you make unknowingly. Sometimes, in another book, I felt like I had to be funny on every page. And so that pressure that I put on myself, that was there. The story was meant to be about an elderly couple, but after discussions, it changed into a younger couple. So those sort of compromises, which I made willingly, nobody forced me to, but it didn't happen with Welcome to Paradise. And with Mrs. Funnybones Returns, there aren't really any compromises because each column and each essay is really talking about a particular issue in the way that I want to talk about it.
We're living in the age of AI. Have you embraced it? There are obviously many positives about AI, but especially for writers who rely only on AI and they lose their individuality and style, what do you have to say about that?
I think that, again, AI is a tool and it can be both beneficial and dangerous. For writers, I would say that we need to stay away from it. Maybe it's good for editing, maybe it's great for copy editing, but I really don't see how AI can write for you. AI doesn't have an image in its mind of a rooftop with a big tray of jelly sweets in it, sparkling in the sun, pink and green with those little sugar molecules. How would it describe that? It's never tasted pickle. How would it tell you what it's like? And how would it tell you that every time you have a bite of mango pickle, there is somebody, like at least for me, there was one Santoshi Amma who used to give me pickle. She's walking beside me while I'm tasting this pickle no matter where I am. How does an AI do that? Where are the layers?
That's true. You began as an actor, and after the point you realized you didn't want to do that. Since then, you reinvented yourself. You've established yourself as an author. You're a columnist, entrepreneur, now a talk show host. Which of these roles do you enjoy?
I'm happiest, or well, not happiest. I can't say that because writing is a very, very difficult process. I'm most at peace when I'm writing. It's the place where I'm both within my mind and I'm also observing it. And I find that calming. The rest of it is chaos, but I enjoy the chaos. I'm at a stage in my life where I want to experiment. I want to try new things. I want to see, learn, give it my best, push myself out of my comfort zone. So whether it means doing a talk show, whether it means going back to university, whether it means planning a road trip across Ladakh, I want to do things that will push me out of my comfort zone because I have only this one life. I'm running out of time. I need to do whatever I can that will push me out of stagnating. It's very easy to stagnate right now.
You spoke about a talk show too much right now, it's on air. How did the idea of starting a talk show come about?
I was interviewing people for Tweak Anyway. It was called The Icons. And when they approached me to do this, I thought it's fun. It's a bit, I guess, different from what I normally do. It's much lighter in that manner. And I would be doing it with Kajol. And I've always felt a certain, I would say, warmth from her, and I felt I could trust her. She'd have my back, I'd have her back. So it was a safe space. in that manner.
Why do you think so many people are getting into talk shows? Does it make good business, or is it just that people have a fascination for listening to other people's stories and journeys?
If you're asking me, I got paid really well. So, you know, so, 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 you know, that was helpful, I would say. And I don't know why other people are doing it. I think, well, podcasts are doing really well. People have stopped reading. They just want to hear things and see things. And when you're on the go, I suppose it's an easier way of, you know, imbibing information. So perhaps that's it. Maybe it's just a trend. I don't know. I haven't analyzed it.
How do you deal with criticism, for instance? Everyone has a smartphone today, there's internet connection, everyone just has a social media account, you just put any opinion out there. Do you get affected by what was written out there?
So I started off, I've been born in the spotlight. And I started off at a very young age. I was 17 when I started working. I'm almost 52 now. And at some point in my life, I came to the conclusion that there were only two things I could control. I could control my preparation and I could control the execution, my execution of that material. I cannot control outcomes. So once I have satisfied myself that I have prepared as thoroughly as I can and I have done it to the best of my ability, I don't really bother beyond that with what people are saying. I will listen to them. I will take that feedback. I'll try and incorporate it if it makes sense to me. But there is no ego involved. That is their opinion. As long as I have given it my 100%. Some things, for example, you're asking me today about Mrs. Funnybones' returns. If I was so worried about criticism, I wouldn't have written that first column and we wouldn't be here.
Coming back to your book, tell us the story behind the name, Mrs. Funnybones. How did it come about?
Like most things in my life, it was, I guess, an opportunity to reform a tragedy. See, I've broken every bone in my body. There's nothing that's left. And I've been doing this since I was a child. I've broken my collarbone, my tailbone, both my arms, my leg. I have 40 ligament tears on my left leg and just 10 on my right. So I decided, you know, when I was getting onto Twitter, by then the name Twinkle Khanna had gone, wasn't available.
Oh.
So I thought then, why not take this bit, which has always troubled me. And I'm also slightly, well, I like to entertain myself and, you know, and hopefully that entertains people. And why don't I mix the two? And that was it. It was Mrs. Funnybones.
What next for Twinkle Khanna?
I don't know. Maybe I have two plans. Maybe I want to go back and study and do my PhD. Or perhaps I want to become the education minister. I have both options in my head. Now I have to see what the world gives me.
Tell me what gave you greater joy, seeing your name and yourself on screen in Barsat, or seeing your name on the book for the first time?
Definitely the book. Definitely the book. Because I grew up, you know, just reading constantly. I have friends in boarding school who claim that I missed lunch because I was reading. I don't think I missed any lunch because I was this big. If I was missing lunch, I would not be that size. But books have been my life. And I still look at myself actually more as a reader than a writer. So yeah, it would be my name on Mrs. Funnybones the first time.
Has that habit helped you improve as a person as well?
Depends upon what kind of books. But I believe that being a science fiction reader has helped me as a human being because my boundaries, borders, tolerances are completely different. Because I grew up not even looking at, you know, my neighborhood or my city. I was looking at the whole universe. When you read science fiction, you have empathy with an alien creature with tentacles who's, you know, breathing out, I would say, helium, and you still know that that person has something in common with you, that creature rather has something in common with you. So what am I going to sit here and look at, you know, differences between human beings and color and race and religion? So it was that, I think, that opened up the boundaries of you know, of what I believe is acceptable.
Wonderful. Twinkle, thank you so much for speaking with Forbes India. Thank you very much. We wish
Thank
you all
you.
the best in everything that you do.
Thank you.